Hey, Tyler tapped his beer can lightly on the table, just loud enough for all 30 people to hear. I've always wondered something. In the Navy, what do you actually do? Fly planes? Or mostly make recruitment brochures look less boring? Laughter broke out. No, I'm serious. He raised both hands, face arranged into perfect innocence. They need all kinds of people, right? People with technical skills, people with strategic thinking, and people who are. He looked me over slowly, then smiled. A little easy on the eyes. The whole table erupted. My husband's aunt clapped. A few cousins doubled over laughing. And my husband, the man who had sat beside me through 16 years, through 2 deployments, through one night in Helmand that I have never told anyone about, looked down at his plate, and stayed there. I sat still, tea glass in hand, face unchanged, because I had learned a long time ago how to stay quiet in dangerous rooms. It was just that this time, the most dangerous room turned out to be my in-laws' Thanksgiving dinner table. And the most dangerous person wasn't Tyler. It was the man beside me who had found something absolutely fascinating about his food and couldn't look up from it. 3 weeks later, when my photograph appeared on Tyler's presentation slide in front of a room full of officers as living proof of his theory that some people in the military climb on looks rather than competence, I finally understood that this dinner had only been the opening act. My name is Caroline Vance. I'm 41 years old. I've been a naval aviator for 16 years, logged more flight hours than I can count without pulling a file, survived 2 deployments and 1 night in Helmand Province that still visits me in the early hours of certain mornings. What I had not survived, not cleanly, not without cost, was the particular kind of hurt that comes when the people at your table decide your dignity is negotiable. This is that story. And I'm telling it because I think some of you know exactly what table I mean. The dinner was at the Weston family home in Ponte Vedra Beach, a 2-story house near the Intracoastal that smelled like sweet potato casserole and 30 years of family holidays layered on top of each other. David and I had driven down from Jacksonville that morning. My left shoulder had been tight all week from a training exercise, and the gray November sky over the St. Johns River had done nothing for it. David's father, Gene Weston, met us at the door. Retired Navy senior chief, 68 years old, built like a man who had spent 3 decades making young sailors wish they had chosen a different branch. He nodded at me with the particular economy that senior enlisted veterans use for officers they've decided to respect. I'd always liked Gene for that. Tyler Weston was already inside. Tyler was 33, a Navy lieutenant, smart and charismatic in the specific way that makes his other qualities harder to tolerate. Every conversation found its way back to Tyler, his upcoming evaluation, his fitness scores, a briefing a senior officer had specifically requested last month. Nobody had asked. Tyler kept going. His mother smiled. Gene ate quietly and said nothing. I watched Gene more than I watched Tyler. There is a kind of stillness that certain people develop after enough years of leadership. Not absence, but presence held very deliberately in reserve. Gene had it. Tyler was still learning that it existed. Halfway through dinner, someone asked how work was going. I said it had been busy. That was apparently enough to give Tyler an opening. He leaned back, fork in hand, with the relaxed confidence of a man who knows he has an audience. Still flying? When it's needed, he smiled. That's very officer of you. A couple of people chuckled. Fine, let it go. Then came the rest of it. The look, the pause, the words I've already told you, and the silence from the person beside me that cut deeper than any of it. Gene Weston set his fork down. Deliberately, softly, the way you set something down when you need your hands free for what comes next. He looked at me. Not Tyler, not David, me, Caroline. Yes, sir. His voice was completely level. What's your call sign? Tyler snorted. Dad, come on. Gene didn't look at him. What is it? I thought about deflecting. I always thought about deflecting. Instead I answered, Oracle. The reaction was small. Just Gene. His eyes shifted, not wide, not dramatic. Just a fractional change I recognized immediately. The look a person gets when a name they hadn't expected to hear arrives in the room. He sat back slowly. Oracle. Not a question. A confirmation. Helmand package. I nodded once. Tyler frowned. What does that mean? Nobody answered. Gene looked at his son with an expression that contained more weight than any raised voice could have carried. Tyler. What? You should have stopped talking about 10 minutes ago. The table froze. Tyler tried to laugh. Gene shook his head, almost to himself. No idea. He picked up his fork. 2 words. And the dinner never recovered. The drive home was the kind of quiet that settles in after something has cracked, but nobody has named it yet. Jacksonville at night, bridges lit above dark water, Christmas decorations already appearing on the houses we passed. David drove. I watched the window, 20 minutes without a word, then he sighed. Tyler's an idiot. I didn't turn. That's your analysis. What do you want me to say? I turned toward him. I want you to say what you should have said 3 hours ago. He gripped the wheel tighter. I didn't want to make Thanksgiving worse. There it was. The sentence I'd been waiting for. For who? His jaw tightened. I said it again. Quieter. For who, David? We both already knew. Not for me. For the room. For the peace. For his cousin and his mother and everyone at that table except the person he came with. The rest of the drive was silent. I want to be honest about what happened after we got home, because this is the part stories usually skip. Standing in the bathroom at 2 in the morning, yellow light, looking at a face I know well enough to know when it's lying. I was not the person I'd trained to be in a crisis. I was just a woman who was tired. Tired of being reduced to her appearance by people who had never once asked what she'd actually done. And tired, more than anything else, of the specific ache of being invisible to the person who was supposed to see you. If you have ever stood in a bathroom at an hour when nothing is kind, wondering whether the people who love you have ever truly known you, then you already understand where this goes next. 2 days later, Gene called. He wanted breakfast. Just us. We met at a diner near the beach final booths, coffee that arrived without asking. Gene was already there. He stood when he saw me. That told me more about the conversation than anything that followed. He waited until the coffee was poured. Then, I owe you an apology. Simple. No preamble. I told him he didn't owe me anything. He shook his head. I should have shut Tyler down a long time ago. Before Thanksgiving. That got my attention. What does that mean? Gene looked out the window. It means my son has been telling a version of your story for years. A version he invented. He told me slowly, the way senior enlisted leaders deliver bad news factual, watching your face to calibrate how much you can hold. Tyler had been making small comments at family gatherings for years. Nothing dramatic, just steady, quiet erosion. She got promoted because of optics. She gets opportunities because of diversity. She hasn't really flown in years. She's more brand than substance, said in small rooms to people who didn't know better and didn't push back. Some of them believed it. I listened. The colder thing settled in my chest. Not explosive, the slow kind, the dangerous kind that doesn't announce itself when it arrives. How many people? Gene hesitated. Some. That was enough. What hit hardest wasn't the gossip itself. It was the geography of it. These were people I had sat beside at Christmas. People who apparently had a separate, parallel conversation about me every time I left the room and who chose the easier story, the one where I hadn't earned anything, because it required less of them than the truth. Gene looked at me carefully. I wanted you to hear it from me, because if this gets worse, you'll need to know where it started. The phrasing stayed with me. If this gets worse. Not if it stops. Not if Tyler comes to his senses. If. 2 days after that, Simone called. Lieutenant Commander Simone Reyes. 12 years in naval aviation. The kind of person who delivers bad news the way you want it delivered quickly, with full eye contact, no softening. She told me to meet her for coffee. She had something I needed to see. She arrived carrying a folder. Physical paper. That alone made my stomach tighten. She opened it and slid a single page across the table without saying a word. A presentation slide. Draft watermark. Not final, but clearly real. In the center was a photograph, slightly blurred but recognizable. My face? Taken at a family event 2 years ago. Me in uniform, standing in someone's backyard. The caption underneath read, Authority without substance. When visibility outpaces value. I read it twice. Slowly. Then once more, in case I was misunderstanding something. I wasn't. I set the page down carefully. Where did this come from? Simone kept her eyes on me. Someone reviewing the presentation flagged it. And? Tyler was asked to remove it. I looked up. And? She paused. He refused. He refused. Given a direct opportunity to correct the mistake, a professional correction, quietly handled, he argued, in a military context. With his career on the table, I didn't sleep much that night. Not from anger or not only from anger. I was trying to be honest with myself about what I actually wanted. Part of me wanted the clean version. File a complaint. Let the regulations do what they do. Watch it resolve into documentation. But every time I went there, the fallout followed. The family Christmas. David. A marriage already sitting in a fragile place. I wasn't afraid of the consequences. I just wasn't ready to let anger make the decision. The morning of the Leadership and Readiness Forum, I woke before my alarm. Lay there watching the ceiling fan with the specific feeling in my stomach that arrives before something you can't avoid. Beside me, David was pretending to be asleep. Married people recognize the quality of someone else's pretending. You awake? A pause. Yeah. Neither of us moved. Then, you don't have to go. Yes, I do. He nodded. He knew I was right. My absence would become part of the story. And I was tired of other people writing stories about me. The forum was held at NAS Jacksonville, a large conference room near the waterfront. Rows of chairs, a projector screen, the professional atmosphere that military events carry. David and I arrived at 8:15. Jean was already seated near the front, coffee in hand. He gave me a small nod. Nothing more. Across the room, Tyler was near the projector, working the crowd, laughing and shaking hands, entirely comfortable. He looked like a man with no idea anything was waiting for him. Simone slipped into the chair beside me a few minutes later. You okay? No. Good. If you were comfortable right now, I'd be worried. The session began. Tyler took the stage. And for the first 10 minutes, this was the frustrating part. He was genuinely good. Engaging, clear, confident. The audience responded. People took notes. Then he moved into a section about leadership and public perception, image management, the gap between who gets seen and who deserves to be seen. He used careful language, professional language, and the audience stayed with him. Then he clicked the remote. The slide appeared. My photograph. Slightly blurred but unmistakable. The caption beneath it. A few people shifted. Tyler smiled. Confident, completely unaware. We have to be honest, he said, about what we're actually measuring when we celebrate certain people. Something cold and clear settled in my chest. I considered staying silent. Honestly, I thought about it. I could let the moment pass. I could leave afterward and never speak to Tyler again. Easy. Simple. Then I remembered the car at 8:41 at night. The turn signal clicking. The plate my husband had found so fascinating. Every conversation I had apparently not been invited to for years. I stood up. Not dramatically, just stood. The room noticed immediately. Tyler noticed. His smile slipped fractionally. I kept my voice completely level. Lieutenant Weston. Yes, ma'am. Who authorized that photograph? Silence. Instant. Complete. Tyler glanced at the screen. It's been anonymized. That's not what I asked. More silence. Behind me, someone shifted in a chair. Tyler shifted his weight. It's being used as a conceptual example. Of what concept? His confidence had begun to slip, the gap between image and demonstrated performance. I nodded slowly. Did you verify the performance record of the officer in that photograph before using it to illustrate a performance deficit? No answer. A few people exchanged looks. Tyler laughed, slightly less steadily than before. I think we're allowing one example too. You introduced the example. Still not loud. Still not a single step forward. No anger in my voice that anyone could locate. Then a voice came from the front of the room. Old, unhurried. The specific quality of authority that rank alone cannot manufacture. That's a legitimate question. Every head turned. Commander Leonard Pruitt rose from the second row. He used a cane. One hand on the chair back, one on the cane, moving with care but without apology. Once standing, the room paid attention not because of title, but because of the particular quality that certain people carry. The kind that comes from having been somewhere that mattered and not needing to announce it. Tyler looked confused. Pruitt looked at the slide. Then at Tyler. Then, finally, at me. His expression held something. I recognized the measured look of someone deciding how much of the truth to use. Do you know who that officer is, Lieutenant? Tyler swallowed. No, sir. I do. The room held completely still. Pruitt pointed toward me, the gesture deliberate and unhurried. Her call sign is Oracle. The air changed. I felt it physically, the shift in a room when something private becomes public and the room has to decide what to do with it. Tyler blinked. Pruitt continued. Helmand Province, 2007. A lot of decisions made on a very bad night. He paused. I came home because of some of those decisions. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Pruitt looked directly at Tyler. One of those decisions was hers. Tyler's face lost color. Not dramatically. Just enough for everyone in the room to register it. He managed. Sir, I wasn't aware. No, Pruitt said. You weren't. 2 words. The entire weight of the sentence resting on what was left unsaid. The silence that followed permanently changed the temperature of the room. Tyler looked toward the audience. The moderator. Anyone who might intervene. Nobody did. Then David stood. I had not expected that. Not here. Not now. Not after everything. His voice was quiet, but it carried. Tyler. His cousin looked at him. Take it down. Tyler stared. David, take it down. I looked at my husband. The man who had stared at his plate. The man who had chosen peace over the person beside him. Standing, finally, on the right side of something. Then Gene rose from the front row. The room went completely still. Gene Weston looked at his son. When he finally spoke, his voice had the quiet of a senior chief whose patience has reached its end and who no longer needs volume to be heard. Tyler. His son turned. Gene looked at the slide, then at Tyler, then back. I spent 30 years teaching sailors that the uniform means something. Nobody coughed. Nobody shifted. Somewhere, you learned that the room matters more. That sentence landed with the specific weight of something that comes from exactly the right person, at exactly the right moment, because the person it mattered most to was standing at the front of the room with no response that would serve him. The moderator removed the slide. The projector moved forward. The session ended early. Outside, the rain had stopped. Jacksonville sky clearing over the flight line. I stood near the parking lot until Tyler found me. No audience. No microphone. Just us. His usual confidence was absent. What remained looked like someone who had just realized the floor beneath him had been glass the entire time. So, he said, you happy now? I looked at him. For the first time I could remember, what I saw on his face was not arrogance. It was fear. No. He frowned. Then what was the point? I thought about Thanksgiving, the slide, the years. The point, I said, is that you don't get to make me smaller just because you're afraid you're not big enough. Tyler had nothing to say. And for once in his life, the silence belonged entirely to him. The fallout was messier than endings are supposed to be. Half the family had picked a side by Saturday. Several of them didn't pick mine. Tyler's mother sent a message asking me to handle things with more grace. I stared at the word. Set my phone face down on the counter. There comes a point in life when you stop explaining obvious things. That evening, David and I sat on the back patio. The street, Johns River visible in the distance, orange with the last of the light. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said, I owe you a real apology. I looked at him. He continued without prompting. At Thanksgiving, I was thinking about keeping the peace. I told myself that was right. He paused. I understand now that I wasn't protecting peace. I was protecting myself. The honesty was uncomfortable in the way real honesty always is. That's how you know it's real. Yeah, I said. I know. He nodded. I was wrong. Then. I need different. Not sorry. The relief on his face was immediate. The understanding that followed it was better. 3 months later, Tyler called. I almost didn't answer. Curiosity won. His voice was different, less polished, less certain. He said he wanted to apologize. Not the performed version. I spent a long time convincing myself you were the problem, he said. I was jealous. I didn't interrupt. You never had to tell people how important you were, he said. And they still respected you. A pause. I used you to make myself feel bigger. The truest thing Tyler Weston had ever said to me. I sat with it for a moment. That's the most honest thing you've ever told me. A short, genuine laugh came through the phone. Then, can we start over? I thought about it long enough that he probably became nervous. No, I said. But we can start from here. The relief in his voice was real. And strangely, so was mine. Here is what I have spent the months since trying to understand. Tyler built a slide. He chose a photograph. He wrote a caption. He submitted it to a professional event. And what he was really doing, what I don't think he even fully understood at the time, was trying to become the author of my story. Because that is what people do when they cannot compete with your reality. They rewrite it. They take your face, your name, your history, and they attach a different explanation to it. One that makes their own position easier to hold. The slide was not an analysis of my career. It was a confession of his fear. And fear, dressed up in professional language and presented on a projector screen, is still fear. What I didn't expect, what genuinely surprised me, was how much it mattered that David finally stood up. Not because it fixed anything instantly. It didn't. 3 weeks of silence doesn't disappear because of one sentence at a conference. But there is a difference between the person who defends you when it costs them nothing and the person who finally stands when it costs them something real. David stood when it cost him something. That mattered. That was the beginning of something different. Here is what this story taught me that I want to leave with you. You cannot control what version of you other people carry around. You cannot stop someone from writing a caption underneath your photograph in their own mind. What you can control is whether you keep walking into rooms where that version is the only one on offer. Whether you keep sitting quietly while someone else narrates your life to an audience. Whether you keep waiting for the people who love you to finally decide your dignity is worth one sentence. The one thing I would ask you to do, not someday, tonight, is this. Think of one room in your life where someone else's version of you has been running unopposed for too long. One conversation you've been postponing. One sentence you've been holding back because the timing never felt right or the cost felt too high. You don't have to deliver a speech. You don't have to win anything. You just have to stop letting someone else's caption stand as the final word on who you are. And here is the question I want you to sit with. Is there someone in your life right now who knows your name but has never once asked about your story? Who has an opinion about what you've done without ever asking what it cost you? What would it change for you? Not for them if you told them anyway. I want to know what part of this stayed with you. Not what you thought about Tyler. Not whether I handled it the right way. What part of this story recognized something in your own life? Drop it in the comments. One line is enough. And tell me where you're watching from tonight and what time it is there. I mean that genuinely, not as a formality. I read everyone. If someone came to mind while you were listening, someone carrying this kind of invisible weight, someone whose version of themselves keeps getting rewritten by people who should know better, send this to them. No explanation needed. Just send it. They'll know why. Subscribe so the next story finds you when you need it. I'll be here. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Jacksonville, Florida, to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental.